so bad.
So you're for the...
Yeah, for Williams.
You know, I gotta look it up. Let's go. So if you see, like if you go to African soil, you see mats, you'll actually, you notice the ones that have human hair, like a piece could be 1,000. See what human hair could be 2,000. Yeah.
So this is Nicolene Thomas, and this is all of her installations.
Oh.
About, she grew up in the 70s, and this is all about her growing up and her. It continues. This is a video that talks about
All right, good evening everyone. Welcome to the Museum of the African Diasporas and this lovely program, Community Voices of Public Dialogue, which is organized in collaboration with SF MoMA every Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. You can turn that down. Just a second. It was on that same part when I started. Okay. If only we had more staff people. So every Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. we invite creative thinkers from the community to come in and reflect upon identity, space, and diaspora in portraits and other likenesses from SF MoMA. And we ask them to reflect on self-representation and inspiration for their own work based on the art that makes up this exhibition. This month we are featuring artists from the 3.9 Collective, an association of African American artists, curators, and art writers who live in San Francisco and came together to draw attention to the city's dwindling population of Black residents. The collective bears witness to this phenomenon and seeks to reverse it by drawing attention to the historical and ongoing presence of Black artists in the city and creative expression in its Black communities. And we're also lucky enough to be hosting a conference put on by the 3.9 Collective this Saturday from 11 to 6. So if you are in the area, or get yourself to the area and come to this wonderful conference on Saturday. But today we welcome William Rhodes, an artist working out of San Francisco. His art explores themes of hidden knowledge, iconographic imagery and form, and variation in meaning depending on the cultural context. Explorations into the contrast between traditional cultures and our modern one have also added depth to the narrative quality of his work. I'm very pleased to have with us today William Rhodes.
Thank you. First of all, I have to thank all of the influences from my ancestors and also thank the influences from all of these amazing creative people that have been around me. For some reason, I've been around amazing artists, you know, Ron Saunders, Michael Ross, Christine Mays, the list goes on. But also, I've been blessed to be around some amazing poets and writers and spoken word artists, Mr. Kanara Sankofa. So that has inspired me, and for whatever reason, now I'm going to tell you right now, I am.
Welcome. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Museum of the African Diasporas and this lovely program, Community Voices of Public Dialogue, which is organized in collaboration with SF MoMA every Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. You can turn that down. Just a second. It was on that same part when I started. Okay. If only we had more staff people. So every Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. we invite creative thinkers from the community to come in and reflect upon identity, space, and diaspora in portraits and other likenesses from SF MoMA. And we ask them to reflect on self-representation and inspiration for their own work based on the art that makes up this exhibition. This month, we are featuring artists from the 3.9 Collective, an association of African American artists, curators, and art writers who live in San Francisco and came together to draw attention to the city's dwindling population of Black residents. The collective bears witness to this phenomenon and seeks to reverse it by drawing attention to the historical and ongoing presence.
I don't know why. I could not sleep last night. Spirit came over me and said, I need to have a different approach to my talk. So I'm going to start. I want you to put as much positive energy out as you can before I start. You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see? You're everything I hope for. You're everything that I need. Is it love at first sight? Or is it because your face was the first thing to greet me? You are my God. You healed me. You held me. You took me close. You made me feel safe in your arms. You became the Virgin to my Mary. You became the womb to my tomb. You became the heaven to my earth. You became my all. You became my all. Until I became hypnotized. I learned to change my views of you. I questioned your skin. I questioned your hair. I questioned your love. Then I learned to hate you and myself. Now we float. We float. We float. Back to the start. Back to the start. How do we start? So I ask you the question. I'd like to talk about Nicolene Thomas. This piece was dedicated, the piece that I wrote this earlier this morning. This piece was dedicated to this amazing piece of artwork. Nicolene Thomas, I read a little bit about her bio, and I was just fascinated with the fact that she studied so many classical artists throughout the years, and she felt like there was a void in reference to these classical images representing Black women. And when you really think about it, when I look at this piece, it really takes me back to really the first images of what was beauty and what was classical beauty for me. You know, I started off real, just like any average kid, and I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. I grew up with a dad who was very much a part of the civil rights movement. My dad unconsciously instilled certain things inside of me about what was beauty. My father formed one of the first early Black magazines called Black Times. Started in 1968 and ran until 1978. So in this magazine, my dad, whether he knew it or not, really instilled this whole sense of what beauty was with certain women. Because these were some of the earliest women that I saw. So over time, some of those images started to change in my mind. It started to change. And when I look at this piece, it really takes me back to that era and to that period of this classic beauty, and really seeing the value in that type of classic beauty. I was really, when I first saw her work, I was just totally inspired because I felt like myself and this sister, we were just completely in sync with certain things, with a lot of the works that I do. I'm doing a series of pieces where I'm searching for God. And I'm looking for God, and I'm wondering, you know, does God look like what Michelangelo said? Or does God look like this? Because these are some of the first women that I saw, and this was God to me, because this God was the one that healed me, helped me, took care of me, loved me unconditionally. You know, it was no question of that. And this is not to belittle anybody else's God, but I have to say, I had to trust this person. This was my God. So these really began to really change some of these images and these thoughts in my mind. And when like I said, when I see this work, it brings me back to this type of era and this type of period. So I'm just so inspired by her work, and I love what she's talking about and what she's doing. If you get a chance, please continue to look at her work, because not only is she talking about those images, but she's also using things that really just bring a spotlight to what she's doing, because she's actually using rhinestones, she's using crystals, other things that just, it's like a neon sign of love and beauty. And I feel like for all of us, the message is, it's not about one race or one color. It's about, we're in an era right now where we have to find beauty within ourselves, which is the hardest thing to come by right now for everyone. We're all struggling with that. We don't realize that, but we're all struggling with trying to find that beauty within yourself and not allowing someone else to dictate that beauty, whether it be the fashion industry, whether it be television, whether it be the media. They're telling you you should be a certain way. You have to find that within yourself. And maybe that starts with the one who brought you on this planet. Thank you. And I'd like to continue my talk with Sergeant Johnson. Yeah, upstairs. Johnson, oh my gosh, how can I start? He, San Francisco artist, absolute inspiration to me. He worked in ceramic, metal, wood, stone, you name it. I'm sure he could work in garbage if there was enough garbage around. He was an amazing artist. This piece, Forever Free, I saw this piece years ago in a book, and I started my career as a furniture maker and as a sculptor. And I remember seeing his work, and it was classified as primitive in some respects. And it was always this conflict of, if you're producing furniture or certain types of carving, it's always a question in the artwork. Is it craft or is it fine arts? And is one worth more than the other? So it's always this question. So you're a young student, impressionable, really trying to make a decision, which direction do I want to go? So I had to make that decision, and bam, I met Sergeant Johnson's work, and he completely broke through all of those lines, completely. So I am so inspired by him. I don't know if you know, how many people know about his history? If you don't be shy, but raise your hand if you know, because that means if there's a lot of people, I won't repeat his story. A lot of people know about Sergeant Johnson?
I don't.
Just a couple. Okay. Well, Sergeant Johnson, he grew up, he's a biracial, had a very interesting background. His father was Scandinavian. His mother was African American and Cherokee. He had all of these influences because he grew up with this type of an environment, and he, I think, lived in New York, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but he made his way to San Francisco. We're talking via early 1900s. When he came to San Francisco, he became a part of this movement called the New Negro Movement. was this whole new movement, and San Francisco became this place of all of this excitement and bringing out all of these ideas about art, innovation, the whole African American, their place in America during that time. And he was a part of that whole movement. So when he started to produce his work, he had all of this background because this was in his family. He also made his way into parts of South America and also into parts of Mexico, which inspired him as well. Now, the strong connection I have with him is my work is always inspired by my travels as well. So I try to find my likeness and myself wherever I go. If I go into Asia, if I go into Europe, I'm looking for myself because I know we're all brothers. Science has proven that we're all related. But the reality is we haven't caught up with that yet. There will be a point, I have no doubt, that there will be a point in time when we will all be very comfortable with the fact that we're all related, but we just haven't gotten to that point yet. So I'm looking for that, I'm searching, and I'm finding all of these inspirations, and then I realize that this gentleman, 80 years ago actually got to that point. So let me pull out something in my trick bag. I bought this on the bus and people thought it was a bomb. But it's not. It's a piece of artwork. So I made this piece. This is one of my wood carvings. I'm going to pass it around. This is like show and tell in middle school. Because I want you to touch this piece. The difference is when you come to a museum and when you come to certain institutions, it makes sense. There's an insurance and a certain amount of liability based on the art. So if they just let you come in and touch that artwork, that could become a major issue. But I'm not going to sue you if you touch my piece of art. So I want you to put your hands on it because I want you to know this is a piece of wood. This is a piece of life. This is a living piece of wood. We're going to pass this around. I want you to know what that life feels like in that work. And so when you touch this work, I want you to know that this is very similar to Sergeant Johnson. He took a piece of wood, he took a piece of life, and he created even more life in that. So he brought all of those elements together. And so that is meant, when you produce this piece of work, it's a piece of artwork, especially pieces like this that deal with certain elements from the environment. It really goes way beyond just something you would just put on a wall, put on a pedestal. We're dealing with something that's a part of you, just a part of life and a part of nature, which goes way beyond that. So I have 30 minutes, so I'm going to limit what I have to say, because I could stand here and talk all night, and my friends know I can run my mouth. So we're going to conclude. I have some cards I'd like to pass around of my art. And some examples of my art. So, with my cards, these are my business cards, okay? If I say this every time, this is about the spirit. This is about what moves you, what you feel inside. If you receive a card and you don't like the piece, I want you to pass it on, because that means the spirit's telling you not to touch the piece. But this is all my information. I'd like to pass it around. Please feel free to take any of the cards. You can have them. This is supposed to be spread to everyone, so please, I'm going to pass this around. And if we have any questions, I'd love to answer any or talk to anybody, if you do. Any questions?
Yeah. Tell us about your latest travels. You've been traveling quite a bit.
Yes. So, I do a lot of community, lately it's been community-based art projects. Did a tour, did a project in Memphis, Tennessee. Worked with the Metal Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, did a panel discussion and a lecture and a workshop. Also did a project in New York City. I'm about to go to Baltimore, Maryland to do a project, and we're doing the 3.9, which is an African American art collective we have in the city. We're doing an industry conference this weekend, so everybody's invited, so please come back right here. So that's part of the project, and then I'm going to go back to New York to do a project. So,
what are the projects?
So, one example is the Atlanta project is, and also, I'm sorry, Atlanta, Georgia, I'm doing a project. So I'm working with a museum. It's called the Madam C.J. Walker Museum. This is a museum that was actually, I don't know if anybody knows who Madam C.J. Walker is. She was the first black female millionaire, and she made her money from hair products. She actually had a salon. One of her many salons was in Atlanta, Georgia. And she actually physically worked in this salon, or had her employees in the salon. They converted it to a museum, and they also do workshops and outreach programs. So I'm a resident artist there, and I'm going to be doing a community project with that community, with the students in that community, and work around civil rights and issues around just the whole thing of human rights and also justice. If you get a chance to take a look at that area in Atlanta, it's called the Sweet Auburn area in Georgia. That's right down the street from the Martin Luther King Center, Martin Luther King House. There's the oldest WERD, which is the oldest radio station which Martin Luther King used to deliver his speeches out of. And then, boom, Madam C.J. Walker Salon and Museum is right there. So I'm doing community outreach. And I just did, a year ago, I did a large project where I did an international quilt project, worked with students in the Bayview Hunters Point area in San Francisco. We produced sections of a quilt with the faces of Nelson Mandela. Every student got to make these little squares. Then I packed all my stuff up, flew over to South Africa, and went into some of the townships in South Africa and worked with students in the townships producing squares of Nelson Mandela. We put everything together and we could produce 5 amazing quilts. And they're a part of a group exhibition in Baltimore, Maryland. So that's part of what I'm doing in Baltimore.
Well, my question is pertaining to the mask. I'm quite fascinated by the fact that in the underside, you painted it gold. Is there some significance to that, or is it just like having to make sure that every part of it is painted or so forth? I'm quite fascinated with it. I wonder if there's more significance than I know.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I've always been fascinated because, you know, when I have art by other people and I hang it up on the wall and then I take it off, especially old pieces, I used to just be fascinated when you turn it around and you see like little notes or, you know, some little graffiti kind of thing on the back of the artwork. So I felt like, I guess, I wanted to leave my mark. I felt like if my pieces end up somewhere, you know, I want the back to be just as important as the front in some respects. So with a lot of my art, my pieces, it can be, now this is less of an example, that's actually gold leaf. But there are pieces that I make where the backs are just as important as the fronts of the work. Any other questions, comments?
Where'd you get the hat?
I ain't gonna tell you, because I'm afraid you may get one. I got it in San Francisco.
Well, on behalf of the Museum of the African Diaspora and SFOMA, thank you so much, William, for your presentation. And of course, we're open until 6 o'clock, so feel free to explore the galleries, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
So where are you going from here? I'm going to try to come down, but I got
didn't realize things that were every little way, every little way.
but I'll try to come down.
Thursday.
Daughter-in-law had to come to stay with me. That was the other thing that was